It's a birthday request
Whenever
by
I
Raspberry
think about
96
Sam
made by
Raimi's Spider-Man,
Story Street.
I think about this scene.
You're taller than you look.
I hunch.
Just these two kids
What does
about
that
to graduate
mean?
high school with their whole lives still ahead of them, standing on either side of a chain link backyard fence and connecting. Two people who have,
Having
in
a
their
genuine
own
moment
ways,
and not
felt
500
invisible,
quips a second.
seeing each other for the very first time. It's not the first time they've interacted in the movie, but it's the first time they've truly seen one another, not just the simplified image of each other that they had. MJ isn't just the most popular girl in school, she's someone with dreams and passions of her own, a desire to act, afraid of showing people who she really is and the kind of life she comes from. And Peter isn't just a weird nerd, he's a sweet, supportive person who is willing to take those dreams and passions seriously. It's so simple, so stripped down, no crazy camera moves, nothing more than two people talking
having a
in
conversation,
series of shot reverse shots, and it's just so human, man.
Right?
I don't want to be that guy, but damn it, you just don't get stuff like this anymore in
No, you
superhero
don't.
movies. This kind of quiet moment today couldn't go without some silly Tony Stark-esque quip or some kind of self-deprecating remark about how corny this dialogue sounds, or some other kind of wink at the audience because it's not confident enough in itself to play the moment straight. It's a scene defined by a total and complete sincerity, an honesty that isn't concerned with how it will be perceived, but only with being unapologetically itself. And that sincerity not only defines this scene, not only defines this first Spider-Man movie, but defines this entire trilogy. These are stories about people struggling to be sincere, neglecting to live
boys that more relatable the more you grow up.
Consequences that arise from failing to live honestly. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to go through each of these films in turn, look at all of these characters and what they're going through to try and understand what this trilogy is trying to say about sincerity.
It's
and
gonna
why
be a long
I think
ride
it
to get
matters
there.
as much today as it did back in 2002 when it all started. And where better to start than there, in 2002.
And this thing is still copyright proven written, which is why I'm the bigger thing right now, just to try to throw up the copyrights.
Peter Parker
Play it
doesn't know
safe.
who he is. What's the first thing Peter says in the entire movie?
Who am I?
See? Dude's clueless. At the very beginning, through Peter's
And they
opening
get spammed to
narration,
death
this story
nowadays.
is set up as one of identity, a story that will explain who Peter Parker is. And in that opening narration, we get a key piece of information about Peter's identity.
I'd like to tell you that's me next to her.
No.
Heck, I'd even take him.
Whoever Peter is,
That feeling
it's
I would
not
rather be
someone
you
he
right now.
wants to be. He's the kid chasing the school bus while everyone on it, including the bus driver, is laughing at him. And when he gets on the bus, not a single person will let him sit next to them. Nobody wants anything to do with this 26-year-old high schooler. He's pretty much invisible to the girls he likes, and this one friend is also an outcast that nobody likes, and who's also jealous of the affection shown by his father to Peter. By all accounts, it's not a great situation. In these first 10 or so
They could
minutes,
just be a
every
template
last
of
piece
life
who
itself.
Peter is defined by how others see him or don't see him. His entire life is built on what he doesn't have, the kind of person he isn't. He isn't popular, he isn't strong, he doesn't have spiky hair. The one thing that's his,
He can't go
could
Super
maybe
Saiyan.
define himself by, is his intelligence. Something that Harry's father, Norman, reminds
Don't
him
think
of.
he has.
You know,
I'm something of a scientist myself.
But that's not
How did
something
that one
that
line
anyone
become a
around him
meme?
really
Because
cares about,
internet.
and as such, it's not something that Peter really takes any pride in. Peter's one concern is how he's perceived by others, whether or not other people consider who he is to be worthwhile. When he beats up Flash, he's smiling about it. He's proud of himself.
He's popular.
Until someone calls him a freak, and then his smile
not,
drops
right.
and he runs away.
I haven't
One
seen
of
the
his
movie in
first
a bit.
thoughts of what to do with his newfound powers is to win a wrestling competition to get money for a car, to do what else but impress
God,
Mary
look at the
Jane.
car
He relishes
prices
in
back
the
then.
cheers
It's
and
like,
the
oh God,
glory that
that's
comes with
affordable.
beating Randy Bonesaw Savage, and when his Uncle Ben, someone he doesn't need to impress, someone who accepts him as he is, wants to connect with him and understand what he's going through, he pushes him away. He's so focused on what he's trying to gain, what he's trying to earn, that he refuses to see what he has.
and I know I'm not your father.
Then stop pretending to be.
And of course,
That comes back
we know
later.
how that ends. Peter doesn't get paid.
Who doesn't know the
properly for
backstory
fight.
of
Guy gets
Spider-Man?
robbed, and Peter lets the culprit go
It's like
because
2 people on
I
Earth.
missed the part where
That's my problem.
And that same culprit goes on to shoot Uncle Ben, who dies holding Peter's hand, leaving their last true
Truly
interaction
tragic
as Peter's
origin
rejection of
story.
what Ben was trying to teach him.
Remember, with great power
Power comes great responsibility.
And it's only through
quote
that
these
that Peter
lines?
finds his way to understanding what he needs to be and what he really needs to do with this power he's been given. But we still don't know who Peter is. Peter still doesn't know who Peter is. Because while what Peter is
no
doing
one really
now
knows
is
who
certainly
they are
more
in real life.
constructive than what he was doing before, he's still defining himself based on something external. He's just moved from trying to impress people at school to trying to make up for what he did to Uncle Ben.
Unnecessary,
He's
but
still
cool.
defining himself by what he isn't and what he didn't do. And the best way to understand where Peter's arc goes from here is to understand the man who challenges Uncle Ben's words. The man who forces Peter to consider what it really means for great power to come with great responsibility.
Norman
The villains in these
Osborn.
movies are as comic booky as they come. They're over the top and menacing, and at times
And we
even
love them
ridiculous.
for
They are
it.
unashamed of their origins, the foundations on which they were built. These villains feel like they could just as easily be in a comic book from the 60s. And yet,
It's
what
'cause they
Raimi and his
are from a
screenwriters
comic book
bring
of
to
the
these villains
60s.
is a sense of emotional realness. And I think out of all the trilogy's villains, that's no more true than with Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin.
They're comic
The first
booky as
time
hell
we
and we
meet
love
Norman
them.
Osborn, he's talking to his son, Harry. Harry tells his father that he doesn't want to show up to a public school field trip in an expensive car, and Norman responds
By
with a
doing
total
just that.
dismissal.
You want me to trade in my car for a Jetta just because you flunked out of every private school I ever sent you to?
In Norman's very first appearance in the movie, nearly his first line, we see him use his son's discomfort to shame him for not living up to his standards. And he says something else that I find interesting.
Don't ever be ashamed of who you are.
I think the irony is clear, telling his son to be unashamed immediately after shaming him, refusing to listen to what Harry has to say, but still trying
Don't
to
be
play
ashamed
like
of who
he
you are,
cares.
you
And I think
failure.
that sort of duality defines Norman as a character, most apparently in the way that he dresses up in a goblin suit and turns people into skeletons. Because the Green Goblin
With
isn't
early
an alternate
2000
personality.
CGI.
He's not a different version of Norman Osborn, but a different side of him. An aspect of him that Norman has pushed so far down that he can't even recognize it as himself. The Green Goblin is unmitigated anger, frustration, violence, and destruction aimed towards a world that's seeking now to tear him down.
You
The
know
very
how much
first
I
thing he does as
sacrificed?
the Goblin is kill the scientist who wants to hold him back, endangering his entire business. He kills the soldiers who wanted to cut his funding. He kills the board members who want to fire him and sell the company as a direct result of his actions.
What Norman does isn't right, but you can
Everything the
completely
Green Goblin
understand
does in
where
the
he
first
comes
half
from.
Of this movie is a direct response
He's
to bad
wrong,
things happening to Norman
but you can
Osborn.
understand.
A response to everything he's done, everything he's sacrificed being in vain.
You know how much I
Sacrificed.
But when the Green Goblin first shows
5 stages
himself
of
to
death in
Norman,
that
Norman
scene.
looks afraid of that reflection in the mirror, and the Goblin tells him what he's here for.
I am so glad he came back for No Way Home, and he didn't miss a single beat. It's like he's been doing it for years.
Those in your way.
The Green Goblin is something deep down inside of him, this desire to destroy those things he can't control.
The serum didn't
to
invent the
make his
Goblin. The Goblin's always
sacrifices
been part of
worthwhile,
Norman.
to
It just
prove
like
that he lived his
brought
life
it to
exactly
surface.
the way he was supposed to live it. He won't hear anything else, won't accept anything else. Just look at the way he treats his own son. He actively pulls Harry away from any kind of truth about his father by keeping him feeling lesser. He makes Harry feel like his love is all that's worth trying to earn by keeping his affection sparse and usually with a snide remark to undercut it.
You made it. It's not the first time I've been proven wrong.
And the one time Norman shows him any significant attention or love is only when Harry tells him he's right about Peter and MJ betraying him, that he was right about everything. Only when Harry gives himself totally over to his father does his father deign to hug him.
Give
It's
him any
textbook
sort of
emotional
love.
manipulation and abuse. Norman uses love like a weapon in order to keep his son under his control, to always have somebody who will be behind him no matter what.
Creep is my father, all right? If I'm lucky, I'll become half of what he is.
This is what love looks like to Norman Osborn. Uncritical and unwavering devotion, proof that he did everything right, things that the rest of the world isn't giving him. He dedicated his entire life to his business, sacrificed his relationship with his son for it, sacrificed his moral integrity for it, and he was supposed to be rewarded for that. He was
Instead,
supposed
he
to
was almost
succeed as a
fired.
reward for that kind of
Well,
dedication.
and it only
That's how
wasn't
life
because
is
he
supposed to
killed the
work,
people who
and
were
yet
going to
here
fire
his
him.
life is falling apart. And I think the Green Goblin isn't just Norman's vengeance towards those who would get in the way.
It's
as
his
much
psyche
as it's Norman's
collapsing.
frustration with himself externalized towards these other people trying to push him out. He doesn't want the problem to be that he's wasted his life attaining something so fragile as wealth and power in society. He wants it to be these people who are ruining him, disallowing him of what he's owed, all he's earned. The Goblin's goal is to justify Norman's decisions, justify his selfishness and his cynicism by proving not only that acting out of pure self-interest works in helping to get him what he wants, but that in the end, deep down, this is what everyone is really like. When put in the right circumstances, everyone is just as cynical and selfish as he is.
Unfortunately,
He's
he's proven wrong.
Who knows the truth, which is
It's
why
a very
he chooses not
Joker-esque
to kill
question in the
Spider-Man
Killing
initially,
Joke, not
to
the
try
movie
and
version,
pull
the
him
comic book
over to
version.
his side. He basically tells Spider-Man his entire philosophy, what he believes about people.
But the one thing they love more than a hero is to see a hero fail, fall, die trying. In spite of everything you've done for them, eventually they will hate you. Why bother?
The Goblin's world,
Sad thing is, he's
Norman's
not
worldview,
entirely
is built
wrong.
on the idea that not only will people inevitably turn on their heroes, but that their admiration is the one and only reason to be doing this in the first place. The
You're wrong
only
about
reason
that.
to help people, the only reason to be a hero is to be loved by the people you save. And if they will eventually not love you anymore, there's no reason to help them at all. And as such, you should only ever do things for yourself. Peter rejects that, his simple response to why he does this being,
Because it's right.
but when it's immediately shown to him right after that the Goblin was, in some respect, correct, it obviously hurts him. His actions are mischaracterized. Police want to arrest him. The Goblin continues to hurt people to try and get to him. Is this really the way of the hero? Is this what it means to try and do good? Is this what people really think of him? But in the midst of all that, there's someone else. After that rooftop encounter with the Green Goblin, after Peter worries about the people turning on him, who's the friendly face he goes to see?
Mary
I was in
Jane.
the neighborhood. Needed to see a friendly face.
Listen, I'm not here to say there aren't aspects of Raimi's MJ that aren't dated. I'm pretty sure she spends about 25% of her screen time in these movies screaming while in power.
These movies, I'm not going to say they're flawless, but I still love them. Yeah, I'm not going to run to MJ's rescue. Well, you know,
But let me not
defense.
be the first to say that there's a lot more to the character than that. MJ's actually going through something very similar to Peter. She's just as concerned with how others perceive her, just as concerned with how she acts, how she looks, whether or not she's filling the correct role in someone else's life, rather than
Love her in
trying to
that Asian
understand
outfit.
herself and what she really wants. It's kind of
Japanese.
fitting
You know,
that she
kimono,
wants to
that's
act
the
on
word.
stage, because that's all life has been for her, a stage where she says the lines she's been given. But there's a simple thing that happens in this wonderful
ironic
scene
how
I've
it's an
already
act,
mentioned
kind
in
of funny how it's an
backyard that
actress
sets
trying
her
out to be
down
an
a new
actress.
path.
And what for me?
For you? You're gonna light up Broadway.
I think something clicks here, something real. There's something about Kirsten Dunst's expression, like she's almost about to cry. No one's told her anything like that before. No one's ever truly seen her like that before.
They've
Perhaps
seen her as an
because she's
item,
never
an
allowed
object, a
herself
nice
to be
piece of
seen for
candy,
fear of judgment,
arm
or ridicule.
candy.
Even with Peter later
Peter's
in
seeing
the movie,
her
when
as a
she's working
person.
in a diner, having not gotten anywhere with acting, she tries to lie out of shame. Not only is she just generally ashamed of her own failure, but I think she's also scared of showing Peter that he was wrong. Perhaps even considers Peter's affection to have been dependent on her succeeding at following those dreams.
That's nothing to be embarrassed about.
And when she tells him not
A
to tell
job's a
Harry
job.
because he'll think it's low, no doubt influenced by Norman's obsession with status, Peter tells her that it isn't. That having a job is nothing to be ashamed about.
Right?
And
Doesn't
in
matter
these
what the
two
job
scenes,
is.
Peter shows her that not only is she worthy of love as an aspiring actress, but also as a waitress at some greasy diner. She has nothing to be ashamed of, no part of her that's worth being hidden away. And that kind of acceptance starts to rub off on her.
I know it's
starts to
probably all
show her
shot
the
on
worth
set, but
that she
dude, in
always
modern
had.
movies, I
After
keep thinking
almost
this
every
is all
scene
blue
between
screen
Peter
and green
MJ, we
screen
get
stuff,
another
you
scene
know?
where MJ is shown to be
Am I the only
growing
one?
away from that concern
Hopefully
for
not.
what others think of her. After the backyard scene, the next time we see MJ, she's dumping spiky-haired jerk Flash Thompson. After the scene at the diner,
I think it's
we
the
get a
only time
scene
we
where
see
Harry
Flash
is
in the movies in the
disappointed that
first
she isn't
one.
catering herself to his father's standards, and she's willing to say,
Well, maybe he'll be impressed no matter what.
After the scene following MJ's failed audition, we get the Thanksgiving scene where Norman has this awful thing to say about her.
He is a
Beautiful, too. They're all beautiful. Until they're snarling after your trust fund like a pack of ravening wolves.
The MJ at the beginning of the movie probably would have just taken that. It's not like anyone ever treated her any different. It's not like she'd been given a reason for why she shouldn't be treated that way. But now she has.
Thanks for sticking up for me, Harry.
You heard?
Everyone heard that creep.
She stands up and leaves, Harry shouting after her about how great his father is, like a little dweeb. And then the next time Peter and MJ see each other is this scene. This wonderful scene in the hospital after Aunt May was attacked by the Green Goblin. Peter has realized that the Goblin knows
she's attacked by all
He's
the
realized
villains in
that the
these three
Goblin
movies.
isn't going to stop. Not acting responsibly is what got his uncle killed, and acting
least the first two,
responsibly
I don't know.
almost got his aunt killed.
I need to
He doesn't
rewatch
know what
these.
to do anymore, and during all of this, MJ comes to visit Aunt May while Peter is there. In their conversation, MJ confesses to Peter that she thinks she might be in love with Spider-Man after having been saved by him twice. And since Peter knows Spider-Man as his photographer, she asks him if he's brought her up, and Peter uses it as a way to, for the first time, be completely honest with her about his feelings.
The truth is, you don't know what you feel. Except you know what kind of man you want to be. It's as if you've
Fuck, I'm missing part of the context.
reached the unreachable. And you weren't ready for it.
I love the realness of Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone. Tom Holland and Zendaya have some great chemistry, but you
They
have
do.
to
I won't
at
deny
least
that.
respect the willingness of this movie to let Peter go full-on poetic here. For the first time, to tell her exactly how she makes him feel. It may not be realistic per se. Most people may not be able to pull these romantic monologues out when they like,
I
but
wish
it's so
I could.
truly
I so
genuine, so
friggin'
honest,
wish.
seeking to evoke a feeling rather than
But it's
just
comic
depict
book,
it.
it's a
And in this
movie, it's
moment,
okay.
as MJ takes his hand, Peter becomes completely untethered from anything anyone thinks of him. He's not worried about who he isn't. He's not worried about what he's not doing. He's not worried about who he's impressing. He's just telling the truth. But it's that vulnerability that eventually makes its way back to Norman Osborn.
Oh, he's loved her since the 4th grade. He pretends like he doesn't, but there's no one Peter cares for more.
Peter has rejected Norman now, and Norman's desperate to prove his point, desperate to bring Spider-Man down to his level, and so he gives him a sadistic choice.
Yep.
A cable car full of children, or the woman he loves.
Make your choice, Spider-Man, and see how a hero is rewarded.
He fully accepts his role as the villain, desperate to prove his cynical worldview, to make this all worthwhile, only for Spider-Man to save both.
Yep,
Only for the
he
people
does
who are
the
supposed to
undoable.
turn on him to back him up as the Goblin tries to sabotage him. I love this moment, even if it is a little goofy, because it is quite literally
It's a little
the exact
cheesy, but come
opposite of
on,
what
it-
Norman
it
believes.
puts a
Here are
smile on
all
your
these
face.
people trying to help others in need. And in response to that truth, the Goblin takes Spider-Man away from the bridge to beat him bloody in an abandoned building nearby.
Yep.
Angry and proven wrong, all he wants to do is hurt Peter. I remember watching this scene as a kid and being captivated by the violence on display. The idea that Spider-Man
this-
could be beaten like this.
Holding
have
up
his
pretty
mask
well,
torn up. The
mostly because it's
idea
all
that Spider-Man
actual,
was
really
vulnerable
there, and not a
to
CGI
The Goblin
fest.
has the audacity to claim
Except
that
for the
Peter
bomb,
was
but
selfish by saving
I'm
both
okay with
MJ
that
and
being
the
CGI.
children.
I don't want to
His view
blow
of
bombs in
things is
people's
so
faces.
warped by his fear of seeing that Goblin in the mirror that he somehow managed to convince himself that Spider-Man's selflessness isn't selfless because it makes him mad enough to hurt someone else. He's constantly moving the goalposts, unwilling to engage with the truth on any level, the truth that he has prioritized all the wrong things, wasted his relationship with his son for the sake of power, all because if he accepts the truth, he will have to accept the consequences of denying it. And when Peter gets the upper hand, pushed by the Goblin's threats of hurting MJ, he is given the chance to accept
Gets a second wind.
his own consequences.
It's a great moment of
Norman,
Green
in a
Goblin
last-ditch
realizing
effort
that
to
he's
beat Peter,
Peter's been holding
reveals
back the
his
whole
identity to
time,
him.
and only
He
then
plays
does
it like
Peter
the
stop
Goblin
holding
is an
back.
entirely separate entity, like a demon that's possessed him, an identity with no basis in Norman himself. He talks about how he would never hurt Peter. At the beginning, he was the one who complimented Peter's intelligence, tried to make him feel special, as he's done throughout this movie. And here, he's speaking to Peter's ego, trying to make him feel special, telling him how he always knew that Peter would be the one to save him. He stretches out his arms, telling him that he's been a father to him and asking Peter to be like a son, using love like a weapon the same way he used it against Harry. And Peter
only for Peter to
says
reply,
this.
I have a father. His name was Ben Parker.
Well, he was your
Peter
uncle,
has
but we
spent
won't
the
split
entire
hairs.
movie worried about what other people think of him, worried about what he isn't, worried about what he doesn't have.
A car.
About whether or not he's doing the right thing or being the kind of person he should be, or if he's someone worthy of love. And here Norman is trying to speak to that part of him, trying to manipulate it. But Peter is ready now to see and accept the truth.
You put Mary Jane on the line,
He's the son of a man
tunnel
who
vision
showed
in the
nothing
best
but
way
love,
possible.
who wanted nothing more than for him to grow up to be a good man, a kind, loving, and selfless man, to do the right thing with whatever power he had. The truth is that with great power comes great responsibility. If you have the power to do good in the world, you have a responsibility to do that good. And that means accepting when you fail to do it. Whether that's all the time you wasted trying to find happiness in people who failed to see you, or all the love lost between a father and son, or even the death of someone you loved because you refused to see what he was trying to teach you. Norman wouldn't accept the truth that he squandered his power, hurt everyone around him in his quest to avoid the truth, and lost any kind of actual love in his life because he was afraid of it. And that refusal is what kills him. Even in death, he doesn't want his son to know how he failed him.
Yeah, which comes back in the third movie.
At the end of the movie, we're left with 3 characters, all with different truths. Harry tragically doesn't know the truth. All Harry could find in the way of identity was his father's abusive idea of love, and Norman's influence follows him even after his death. His one and only goal now being to find and kill Spider-Man, unaware of the truth of who his father really was or who he really is without him. Harry's identity will forever be tied to his father.
I swear on my father's grave, Spider-Man will pay.
MJ
just give me
more
another couple
hopefully
movies.
is finally able to see that her worth isn't dependent on a man loving her, whether that be her father or Flash Thompson or Harry Osborn. MJ's entire arc is centered around her learning to embrace who she is and what she cares about, learning that the man she loves is the one who inspires her to love herself.
There's only one man who's always been there for me. Who makes me feel like I'm more than I ever thought I could be. That I'm just me. And that's okay.
And
Peter
Peter has
walks
learned
away.
to define himself not by what he doesn't have, but by what he does. To focus not on the elusive daydreams of what could be, but on the realities of what is. To embrace the love that's shown to him now, unearned, rather than chase it elsewhere. In the end, he rejects Mary Jane because he knows that being with her will only put her in danger. He wanted nothing more at the beginning of this movie than to be with Mary Jane, and at the end, he is given the opportunity and doesn't take it. He'll always be her friend, but his identity doesn't hinge on being with her anymore, because who he is isn't defined by that.
Only your friend, Peter Parker.
How about best friend?
That's all I have to give.
The truth
into
of
the
who
next
you
couple
are can
movies.
be scary, because accepting the truth means being vulnerable enough to see it. It means opening yourself up to things you may not want to believe, mistakes that you've made. It may mean giving up the things that you've always wanted. But there is a beauty in sincerity, in finding who you are and living with that truth, rather than denying it, which only leads to pain and destruction. At the end of the first Spider-Man, Peter answers the initial question he posed at the beginning. Who is he? He's the son of Ben Parker. He's a kind, selfless, empathetic hero willing to sacrifice what he wants for the sake of doing the right thing. Who is he? He's Spider-Man.
Couldn't have said it better. Alright, on to the second movie. Because the first one did so well. No jokes.
Spider-Man 2 opens with a similar opening monologue from Peter.
I'm Spider-Man.
Great
given
opening,
a job
too.
to do. And I'm Peter Parker. And I too have a job.
Much like how the opening monologue of the first film clearly established it as
Bit of a
one
time
identity,
skip,
this
it's
clearly establishes this film as one of duality. Peter knows who he is now, but the problem is that he's two separate people. He's Spider-Man, but he's also Peter Parker. It's arguably the idea that is most central to the character, the struggle to live two lives, two separate but interconnected truths. He
That
is both
elevator scene
Spider-Man,
always
the
makes me
selfless
smirk.
superhero, and Peter Parker, the
Ooh.
college student who can't ever make it to class on time, who can't be with the woman he loves even though she loves him back, whose primary source of income is helping the Daily Bugle slander.
Who hates him?
It is not. I resent that. Slander is spoken, and print is libel.
I love J.
His
Jonah
best friend hates his
Jameson.
alter ego, who never
He's-
has any
he's an
money,
evil
never able
prick,
to be there
but
for the people he
I don't
loves,
know.
and it's all because he is committed to being this other person. Once again, by all accounts, it's not a great situation. And it's that
Ugh.
internal tension that takes center stage in this movie. It's that tension between these two truths that seem completely incompatible. He is Spider-Man and he is Peter Parker, but being Spider-Man is ruining Peter Parker's entire life, and he has no idea what to do about it. Fusion is a big deal in this movie. The idea of taking two or more separate things and pushing them together into one fully formed whole. It's what Otto Octavius is trying to achieve in his experiments, and it's what Peter Parker
The power
can't
of the
seem to
sun in the
achieve
palm
his
of my
life.
hand.
Because everything in Spider-Man's life is in some way detrimental to Peter's life. And I think that's no better represented than through this scene, an obvious callback to the backyard scene of the first film.
Yep.
But unlike that scene where Peter and MJ are seeing each other for the first time, they're both incredibly distant here, neither of them saying what they want to say. MJ is practically begging for Peter to tell her the truth, asking him leading questions, trying to get him to react to her seeing somebody else, doing everything short of just saying, "I know there's something you're not telling me." And Peter keeps everything to himself. The only thing
Car's
he
a little
allows
too
himself
close to his
is-
chest.
I'm gonna come see your play tomorrow night.
You're coming?
I'll be there.
In this
Except he
entire
won't.
conversation, this moment is easily the most genuine. It's actually kind of cute the way MJ smiles in surprise at Peter coming to support her as she achieves her dreams. It's so obvious how much these two care for each other, but Peter only ever keeps her at arm's length. Going to see her show is the most he can think to do in regards to retaining that connection. And then
What
he
a
doesn't
fitting
even get
title
to
for
go to the
tickets.
play because of his responsibility as Spider-Man. It's not just that he can't show up for things. It's not just that he's an empty seat. It's that being Spider-Man actively limits who Peter can even be. Being Spider-Man means that he can't really be Peter Parker. He can't really have any genuine connections with the people he cares about. He can't even wash his clothes without Spider-Man getting his stink all over it. Living that truth of being Spider-Man means, at least on some level, abandoning the truth of being Peter Parker. And so, the primary question of the movie is it worth it? Should Peter Parker continue to be Spider-Man if it means neglecting the truth of what he wants?
Naturally,
And that
yeah.
question brings us
But
to Dr. Otto
just because the
Octavius.
duality of it all.
Otto is everything Peter wants to be. A man
A
who is
role
both
model, if you
literally
will.
and figuratively
There's a lot of
dedicated
father
to
figures in
fusion.
these
He's a
movies.
successful scientist doing good in the world with the woman he loves right by his side through it all. Every part of his life is in perfect balance with everything else. His intelligence is its own power that comes with its own responsibility, but that responsibility isn't forcing him to neglect any other truth of who he is or what he wants. And I think Peter looks at him and sees some hope for himself. There must be some secret Otto has for how he manages to do all of this. There must be something Otto can teach him about this balancing act. He's full of little nuggets of wisdom. He's so likable and charismatic. He seems to have everything figured out. He understands fusion better than anyone. But Otto is also a character defined by his ego, his pride. Amidst Alfred Molina's wild likability, it's easy to miss the slight arrogance underneath the surface. The way he outright dismisses Peter's concerns, the way he compares himself to Edison and Beethoven, the way he starts his presentation about this extremely dangerous fusion reaction with a stupid joke that's not even relevant. The way he literally says this.
The power of the sun in the palm of my hand.
The way that things start to go wrong and he refuses to stop it because he refuses to even consider in the moment that he
messed up.
miscalculated, and the consequences of that mistake are catastrophic.
Ooh.
But there was one successful fusion that occurred that day.
Himself with his own arms.
In my head.
something talking.
And it won't
this
shut
scene
up.
Is interesting because Otto actually starts by recognizing his own.
I do
fault.
love that
He
in No
says
Way Home they
explicitly,
brought that fact that the
only
arms
for him
don't
to turn
shut
around
up.
and say,
Only until
I couldn't have miscalculated.
what I notice in this moment is that the arms aren't
fixes this
talking
there.
to him. They don't tell him you couldn't have miscalculated and then he agrees. The movie makes it a point to have him actually converse with the arms when the arms are talking. So he comes to this conclusion himself. The arms just guided him there. Just like Peter, Otto has two
I always
sides,
assumed there was
two
like some
halves
sort of like
himself.
talking
the
in the
devoted
head, though.
scientist who wants to change the world and the prideful man who wants nothing less than the power of the sun in the palm of his hand. And now the prideful man is the only part of himself with anything left to salvage. And the only voices around to influence him are the ones who want him to go down this path. So that prideful man with no regard for how his actions may affect others becomes Otto's entire self. Abandoning his truth.
You know, you have hands though, dude.
And embracing his truth.
Like, if I had robot hands, I'd probably abuse
Even
them
this
too.
man dedicated to fusion couldn't hold it all together. And Otto isn't the only one in the movie going through this kind of transformation, completely abandoning entire parts
Man,
of
those
himself.
robot arms
Harry
so hold up.
Osborn,
I wonder
now
how
trying
much
to
were
inhabit the
real
role
and
of
how much was
businessman, a role
CGI.
his father would have been proud of, lost a lot of money when Otto failed. And as a result of that failure, Harry completely abandons that ambition in order to focus solely on getting revenge on Spider-Man. And MJ, tired of Peter's empty promises after being let down by him again and again, chooses to abandon her love for him and get married to John Jameson. And then there's Peter himself. He's on the verge of losing everything he cares about because of Spider-Man, in the same way that Otto's arrogance lost him everything. Even Spider-Man is losing his powers because of Peter, because Peter doesn't want
having
to
a
be
midlife
Spider-Man anymore.
crisis.
And if he keeps going on like this, torn between these two parts of himself, if he doesn't choose, he's not going to have anything at all. So he chooses.
No, Uncle Ben. I'm just Peter Parker.
He quits.
I'm Spider-Man.
I can't blame Peter for doing
Remember
that.
back to the end of the first movie.
I have a father. His name was Ben Parker.
To have this internal decision framed as rejecting his uncle not only works in him rejecting the great responsibility mantra, but also in rejecting the idea of himself he had at the end of the first movie. That initial question this film asks, was it worth it to embrace this identity as Spider-Man, is
And the answer
seemingly
is
answered here by
no.
Peter.
At least
No
that's how it
more.
seems.
And then we get the best montage in cinematic history.
Lips keep rolling on my head. It works
Pathos
so
can
well,
be
and I
used
can't tell you why for the
intentionally,
life
and
of
by
me.
God, it is used intentionally here. The MCU could never. It is such an
You're
immediate
right.
transition from that somber, dimly lit, dramatic scene to something so bright and lighthearted. Like Peter
Take this
has
walking
finally
on
figured it out.
sunshine.
This is all he needed.
This
to
needs
do.
to be
He can
played
watch
more.
Cop cars pass and just take a bite of his hot dog and ignore it. He can do well in his college classes. He can work on his bike. Everything is perfect. Almost too perfect.
Right?
Yeah, this scene is cheesy as all hell, and that is so precisely the point. It feels fake. It feels manufactured, comedically so. Peter made one choice, and all of a sudden, somehow, everything is right in his world like a dream. Only for the very next scene where he finally goes to MJ's play to wake him right back up.
You think just because you saw my play, you can talk me out of getting married?
Peter thinks
Well,
that he can
yes.
just flip a switch, choose a side, and suddenly everything will right itself towards what he desires. He thinks
No.
that because he made this
I wish
choice
that was
in
how
his
life
life,
worked, but
everyone
no.
else's life must follow suit, and yet MJ tells him here that that's not how this works. She's getting married in a church, not a hilltop like Peter imagined, because her life isn't subject to the whims of his imagination. No one's is.
Thank Christ. Imagine how much more chaotic life would be if
There's
it was
some
based
part
on
of Peter that
imagination.
isn't there anymore. Perhaps even the part of him that MJ fell in love with. Things aren't going the way he wanted them to go. He still isn't getting what he wants, while the echo of his responsibility continues to reverberate everywhere.
He's being
he goes.
selfish.
And among
He
that, he
knows this.
listens to Aunt May blame herself for Ben's death.
If only I had stopped him, we'd all three of us be having tea together.
And for the first
It's not
time in
your
this
fault.
movie, not unlike in the hospital scene with MJ in the first movie, Peter tells the truth of what really happened that fateful night.
The thief was running towards me. I could have stopped him, but I wanted revenge. So I let him go. I let him get away. He wanted a car. He tried to take Uncle Ben's. Uncle Ben said no. And then he shot him.
Mm-hmm. Now we later found out that was an accident, but that's beside the point.
Uncle Ben was killed that night for being the only one who did the right thing.
Peter tries to take May's hand, but she pulls it away soundlessly and leaves Peter alone in one of my favorite shots in the trilogy. All the empty space in the frame accentuating the sense of loneliness and silence as Peter's confession dissipates into the air. Unlike his decision to reject Uncle Ben, this doesn't give him any immediate pleasure. In fact, this confession, this sharing of the truth,
breaks him.
Seems to be a mistake. Just another wrong choice and just another part of Peter's life falling apart that he doesn't know what to do about. And then he comes across a building on fire, a young child trapped inside, and without his power, in a moment of impulse, he runs in and he does save them, only to learn that
some poor soul got trapped on the 4th floor. Never made it out.
It still
Peter
wasn't
made
enough.
his choice. But now he just has a whole new set
But
of
he did
problems.
save a
He
life,
can't
and that's
help people
important
way
at the
he
end of the
wants to
day.
because he doesn't have his powers. He can't be with Mary Jane because he's no longer the person she fell in love with before. And that leaves him questioning the same way he has been for the entire movie.
Am I not supposed to have what I want? What I need? What am I supposed to do?
Haven't we all been in a place like this before emotionally?
Yes.
Especially at this age, as an adult for the first time, trying to figure out how to make all this work.
Yes.
And for every decision you make to come with new problems.
As a kid, you come for the superhero stuff. As an adult, you realize you come for the human moments. And stick around for the superhero stuff, of course. That stuff doesn't get old.
Would you like a piece of chocolate cake?
Screw MJ. She should have gone with this woman. No, I'm kidding. Well, a little bit.
Incredibly minor character. So minor, I haven't even mentioned her up until this point. Her name is Ursula, by the way. But this is a critical moment in Peter's arc. A moment where, in
forgot about setting the
response to that
stove on
question,
fire.
the universe doesn't give him an answer, but a piece of chocolate cake. A moment of kindness and simplicity when everything
just a chance to frickin' breathe.
Of joy and
a break.
Completely and utterly divorced from Peter's actions and decisions. This isn't something Ursula does because Peter asked her to, or in response to anything Peter did to her or for her.
It was just a genuine moment of kindness.
That's the kind of person she is. And following that, Peter talks to May again as she's moving out of the house.
I believe she was like the daughter or the niece of the Give Me Wrench guy.
I can only imagine he wants to do some kind of damage control, only for May to surprise him with this.
You made a brave move in telling me the truth, and I'm proud of you.
Yeah, water
Sharing
under the bridge.
Was hard, both for Peter to say and for Aunt May to hear, but in that difficulty, they both found something greater, something more. That weight is lifted, and the two of them can move on together without that between them anymore. Sharing the truth didn't damage their bond, it strengthened it. Even
it just needed a minute.
Even if it took some time. This will last much, much longer than Peter's joy before when he rejected a part of his true self. And with that lesson fresh in mind, the little boy helping May pack, Henry Jackson, wonders where Spider-Man is.
75%?
Never guess who he wants to be. Spider-Man.
We all want to be Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, and it ruined his life.
That is a true. I love that moment. He wants to be Spider-Man. Why?
To be that.
Because he knows.
Everybody loves a hero. People line up for him, cheer them, scream their names, and years later they'll tell how they stood in the rain for hours just to get a glimpse of the one who taught him to hold on a second longer. I believe there's a hero in all of us.
I want to believe
that
too.
The truth of it is this.
I want to believe that
there
too.
is a hero in Peter Parker. Not because of his powers, not because he wears a mask, but because he's a human being. He's a human being like Ursula is a human being.
Ursula's a hero in that moment just for giving Peter a piece of chocolate cake.
On a second longer. And a second longer was all it took to know that Aunt May still loved him in spite of the truth, and because he was willing to share that truth and be
Life is hell, but we humans
Spider-Man
have
isn't
to
a
be
hero
angels.
because of his powers. Spider-Man is a hero because of the humanity of Peter Parker. Spider-Man isn't a hero because he had the superhuman strength to stop a train. He was a hero because he was willing to put everything on the line to stop it. He did that
Though the
without
powers
mask
didn't
on.
hurt
He
any.
did that not as Spider-Man, but as Peter Benjamin Parker. That's why I think this set piece has become so iconic. Sure, it's pretty much perfectly shot, choreographed, and
Oh,
edited, but that's what makes
it
a
still
great
holds up
set piece.
perfectly to
What
this
makes it
day,
iconic
especially the
is
extended
what it
version.
means. The sacrifice of it that embodies Peter's entire
Like, you could put
arc,
that
and
scene in a
willingness of
movie
Peter to
nowadays, and it
potentially
would not
sacrifice
be
his
out of
own
place.
life in order to
Heck, it might be
save
better
all
than
these
some action
people
scenes.
He doesn't even know. It's Peter's willingness to not give up, not quit, but to hold on a second longer. And everyone sees who Spider-Man really is without the mask. This is the one thing Peter has been scared of for this entire movie, the one option
But they
he
won't
wasn't
tell a
willing to
soul.
consider. Because what could happen if he allowed himself to be that vulnerable? What could happen if somebody, anybody, knew who he really was?
His loved ones would be at risk, except...
We won't tell nobody.
There is nothing, not a single moment in any other Spider-Man
Yes,
movie,
even
hell,
this.
maybe even in any other superhero movie at all, that makes me feel the way that this moment makes me feel. And in this moment, the movie answers its initial question for real this time. Yes, it was worth it. And this is the reason why. Because
Such good
rejecting the
movies.
truth, rejecting a part of yourself only creates different problems. You can't escape having to deal with these kinds of things, these tough conversations, or not being able to have what you want. But recognizing that you cannot be...
You can't always
half
get
of
what you
yourself,
want.
Recognizing
You try
that you
sometimes,
cannot
get
live
what you
a
need.
life of hidden truths will equip you to face those problems unashamed. And Peter takes that lesson to his final encounter with Otto and uses it to reach him. He pulls off his mask, shows Otto who he really is as he tries to connect with him honestly, to use the truth of who he is to bring Otto back.
You once spoke to me about intelligence.
How smart are you now?
That it was a gift to be used for the good of mankind.
A privilege.
And he uses the words of Aunt May to show him that he can still do the right thing.
Sometimes, to do what's right, we have to be steady and give up the thing we want the most, even our dreams.
And with those words, Otto makes the decision to accept what he's done wrong and sacrifice his dream and himself for the sake of doing the right thing.
He dies the
and
hero
Peter
in the
turns
end.
around, MJ standing there, seeing him without the mask, open and vulnerable. After it's all over, they get to talk for the first time in this movie completely openly, no secrets, just sincerity.
I will always be Spider-Man. You and I can never be.
But MJ still has to share her truth, still has to embrace the part of herself that she rejected.
I love that reveal.
It's wrong that we should only be half alive, half of ourselves. I love you. So here I am, standing in your doorway.
In a wedding dress.
I've always been standing in your doorway.
Spider-Man 2 is a film about sharing your truth. And
That
that
line
is a
feels like it's trying to
scary,
be deeper than it
scary
actually
thing
is,
to
but
do
eh.
sometimes. Because sharing your truth requires the
You can indulge
utmost
himself a little.
vulnerability. It requires you to be willing to say something you cannot take back, do something that may hurt. But as Mary Jane said, it's wrong that we should only be half of ourselves. You can't escape all those sacrifices that come with the truth, whether you embrace it or not. But it's only by living that truth and sharing it with others that you'll find all the good that comes with it too. Whether it's a piece of chocolate cake or finally getting to be with the person you love the most.
Such a good movie. Now on the third one, they're considered the black sheep of the trilogy. Though I still like it.
It's not even a hot take anymore to say that I like Spider-Man 3. It's a lukewarm take at most.
Right.
I don't know a lot of people who still vehemently hate this movie.
That's because there's been far worse movies.
I think Spider-Man 3 was the first time in my life I had seen a response like that to a movie. I was about 9 or 10 in 2007, and I remember watching the Hizzy parody and all the reviews and all the people lambasting this movie as a sin against nature. It was rough.
Remember when this was the worst superhero movie ever made?
I kind of just went along with it. I thought
we had no idea how good we had.
That's what I was supposed to think. But now I think this movie still has the exact same spirit that the other two movies had. It still has the same
bit of a
level
mess,
of
but
emotional
it's
intelligence and empathy that
I
the other two movies
didn't call it a bad
had.
movie.
It is still a movie about
all these movies have
sincerity.
flaws.
There was just something that complicated it and turned it into a huge mess. A script that felt like its main purpose was to just make room. But we'll get to that later.
Yeah,
right now,
Venom was shoehorned in, but everyone knows that by now.
The opening monologue from Peter. And surprisingly, the opening monologue doesn't really give us a conflict like the other two did. The third movie's opening monologue is mostly just a list of things that are going
on. The other two open with we're on a downfall. This one opens with, hey, we're actually pretty good now.
In his life, Peter
which is so refreshing.
Complaints. He's at the top of his class. He's dating MJ, who is herself a successful actress on Broadway. And the city loves Spider-Man. His friendship with Harry is kind of on the rocks now that he knows Peter is Spider-Man, but that honestly doesn't seem to bother him all that much. The point is that almost everything is going Peter's way right now. After everything that he's gone through in the past two movies, things are finally looking up. Or at least that is until Harry takes a big old gulp of gobby juice, tries to kill Peter, gets bonked on the head in what actually looks like a pretty nasty fall.
Yeah, that was a
really nasty fall. Of everything important. And while this is very obviously just a means of getting Harry out of the way until they need him in the body,
it just put him out of the story for a bit.
First look at what this movie is actually about.
It feels like somehow I've been gone for a really long time. Now I'm back home.
It's good to have you back.
What is the one bad part of Peter's life at the moment? Harry, his best friend, hates him because his idea of the truth is different from Peter's. And
now it's gone.
Here's a very convenient way to just make that problem disappear, to make that version of the truth irrelevant. And right after this, we see him dealing with another problem popping up in his life. MJ comes to his door, a broken door that Peter has to actively open up in order to let others in, and she tells him about how the critics are screwing her papers. And what's his response?
Listen, you are great. That's a critic. This is something you're gonna have to get used to.
The dude might as well have said, just get over it. He hears her problem only to dismiss it. Treats her
I mean, Peter has a point. You're going to hear a lot of bad comments, especially on YouTube. And again, I don't think YouTube existed back in 2007. If it did, it was in very early stages.
It's like my father wrote them.
Ugh.
As more and more things start to pop up, Peter is just trying to knock them back down like a big game of whack-a-mole. Any problem that shows up, he takes whatever is the easiest route to fix it.
Yeah,
right
just use a sledgehammer. That'll fix the problem the quickest. And when you have a hammer, everything looks like nails.
His newfound sense of ease and happiness. And I get it. The last two movies, Peter has gone through the definition of the struggle. If anyone deserves to be happy, I'd say it's him.
Yes.
But his path to that
but the writers won't let him.
Any truth that isn't his own, any idea of the truth that directly contradicts his, and either ignore it or get rid of it by any means necessary. And for a while that kind of works, but the cracks start to form when MJ gets fired from the show because of the critics, and she doesn't tell Peter. Because frankly, why would she? He's already proven that he's not going to take it seriously. All he's going to do is give her empty platitudes and low-key shame her for feeling bummed in an attempt to make it all go away. And for Peter, it does go away. He doesn't have to deal with it anymore, but he's now at a distance from MJ. She is now actively keeping her truth to herself, which eventually leads to this dinner scene where neither of them are effectively communicating. MJ keeps her secret from Peter, and Peter acts like everything is fine because he doesn't know how not fine everything is. In fact, he's wanting to propose to her at this dinner. He's so oblivious. MJ
this
brings
Bruce
up
Campbell
problems
cameo.
with Peter's behavior. Peter knocks them down, treats them like nothing again, proving to her that she shouldn't trust Peter with how she's feeling and what she's going through. And eventually, MJ walks out, leaving Peter dejected and confused. Peter spent the entire first movie finding his truth. He spent the second movie learning to share that truth with others. And now, in the third movie, while he's completely comfortable with his own truths, he doesn't know how to engage with others' truths, especially those ones that don't line up with his own. All he has room for is...
They love me.
Everybody loves him now, and that means everything is as it should be, right? It turns out that even after everything Peter went through in the first movie, the lesson he learned, when he's given a crowd of people cheering him on, it still becomes all that matters to him.
It's intoxicating.
When people want to criticize him or call him out, he doesn't know what else to do but treat them like they're the problem. And all of this comes to a head when Peter learns about Flint Marko, the Sandman. Just after his botched proposal, Peter and his Aunt May get called down to the police station to be told
Flint's
the man
backstory is so tragic.
Ben didn't. It was actually a man named Flint Marko who
except for the whole shooting
and who escaped from Spider-Man's
Uncle Ben, of
grasp
course, but
only
you know
a
what
day
I'm trying to mean.
before. Still confused and upset about what happened with MJ, Flint Marko becomes a man that Peter can pin all of his current frustrations on. He imagines what must have happened, a man with angry eyes violently pulling Ben from his car and throwing him to the ground, shooting him in cold blood just because he wanted to. In this version of events, it doesn't even seem like Flint wanted the car.
It's
he wanted to hurt Uncle Ben.
It's very easy to go
Peter,
into that
in
sort of
his
mentality.
starts
They
to
were
become
evil.
angry,
There's no other
bitter,
explanation. It makes
closed
perfect
off, standing
sense.
in his apartment listening to police.
But life is rarely that black and white. Even in
MJ
comic
comes
books.
to his door and he opens it for her again, but he does so with reluctance this time. And MJ really tries to connect with him, really tries to communicate. She is genuinely worried about him, and all Peter does is get angry with her, defensive. He pushes her away.
I want to be here for you.
Okay. I get it. Thank you.
You can go now.
I'm fine. I don't need your help.
And MJ leaves.
You know what the saddest part is? Never mind.
Everybody needs help sometimes, Peter.
Peter returns his attention.
If this movie was made nowadays, this room would be CGI fest. Just like I was in Far From Home. They had to CGI in a freaking room. Because God forbid we get an actual studio apartment.
Begins to attach itself to him.
Yep.
And now I have to talk about the symbiote. We all know the story by this point.
Yep.
Avi Arad goes to Sam Raimi, who has no intention of doing the symbiote, has no interest in doing the symbiote,
and says do
thought
the
in his head
symbiote
about it and tells him, "You're being selfish. You have to give the fans what they want." And so Raimi,
because they don't want a good story, that's ridiculous. I'm
an
kidding.
entire storyline into a movie he was already well into making. And it is, in my opinion, the entire reason Spider-Man 3 gets tripped up. Not just because it adds a whole other plotline into a movie that was already dealing with a lot, but also because it really messes with the narrative structure that helped make the first two movies so clean and tightly plotted.
I do like the symbolic,
MJ and Peter,
the symbolism
Harry and Peter,
of the
and Spider-Man and
symbiote.
The story
though.
is made through how each of these three plots intersect and come into
It's like a
conflict
drug.
with one another, all ultimately facilitating a Peter versus self narrative. A story
Even
of
though it's
Peter having
forced
to
in,
come
I
to
think
terms with his
that
own
Sam
flaws,
Raimi did a good
recognize
job
his
of
own
writing around
shortcomings,
it.
and become a better hero by movie's end. That story is weaved throughout the other three plot lines, each one adding their own necessary elements. But what the symbiote does is externalize that Peter versus self story and thus needs time to be fleshed out on its own while leaving the other three plots at an unfortunate distance.
Yeah, they need to get out for a bit.
Adding this plotline into this pre-existing structure was always going to be a mess because this structure isn't suited to that kind of storyline. It isn't conducive to that manner of storytelling that Raimi and his screenwriters had used to such great effect previously. This is why I think Spider-Man 3 has become kind of the poster child for the negative effects of studio and executive interference, because
it hasn't gotten better yet.
Don't fucking know or care about this shit. Avi
Yep.
Arad wasn't thinking about the goddamn story structure. He was thinking about how they could sell twice
Yeah.
as many Spider-Man.
How could we
action
make
figures if he
money?
had two different suits in the movie. But with that being said,
Yeah,
I think Sam Raimi, Ivan
it's the
Reitman,
shareholders that know the least about the product. They don't know the difference between Ant-Man and Avengers.
they could into the story they wanted.
They just know it make
And
money.
works pretty okay, all things considered. The black suit is armor. The suit is power. The suit is, at first, representative of everything Peter feels is slipping away from him. Security and safety from not just physical wounds, but emotional ones as well. The very first thing he does with the black suit is hunt down Marco, and he seeks to hurt him. This fight scene,
and he assumed he killed him.
In the trilogy for its sheer brutality, showing
oh, it is
exactly
well shot. Oh yeah, it's
another
train shot that's well done.
The hits
here
are
fight.
harder than they usually are. The black suit theme and all its pounding dread is loud in your ears. Sure, the final fight in Spider-Man 1 was pretty bloody and brutal in its simplicity, but this?
Yeah. Now imagine that, but Flint isn't made of sand.
And at the end, Peter kills Flint Marco. Of
Right.
course, he doesn't actually.
He comes back, but you know.
Make some more room. But Peter certainly thinks he did.
Good riddance.
This is where Peter's path is leading him. In his desire to avoid any problems, deny any other ideas of the truth that may challenge his own, this is what Peter is becoming. A violent, angry, and literally murderous person. There's only so much you can do to keep these problems down until eventually you just have to start beating them down. And Peter sees that almost immediately. He notices how he's changing in his reflection, and just like with Norman, that part of himself scares him. He throws the black suit back into its trunk as soon as he gets back home, and Aunt May further puts him in his place by telling him that she isn't happy Spider-Man killed Marco.
Uncle Ben meant the world to us, but he wouldn't want us living 1 second with revenge in our hearts.
He even manages to apologize to Mr. Ditkovich for saying,
"You'll
get your rent when you fix this damn door."
I'm really sorry for what happened earlier.
Toby, the MCU ruined that scene for me.
It almost seems like Peter is on his way back from the edge. He went to an extreme, immediately regretted it, and he started.
I don't know, Peter's a little right in I fixed this damn door fix. You keep forcing me to pay the rent, but not fixing any of my problems.
As far as Peter did without feeling any real consequences.
Harry, remember me.
I haven't talked about Harry a whole lot because in the other 2 movies, while Harry played important roles and had character arcs of his own, those arcs didn't really affect Peter's all that much. In the first one, he gave us a lot of information about Norman and MJ, but he didn't give us all that much information about Peter. And in the second one, his role was more just getting Peter to certain places at certain times. It's only in Spider-Man 3 where Harry's arc meaningfully impacts Peter's. And in a less crowded movie, I think this could have genuinely been the best thing about it. Exploring the confusion and doubt of someone who has never been allowed to see the truth of things, finally being forced to face it. Grappling with the emotional abuse he suffered at the hands of his father and the lies he was told by his best friend, in the end forging his own path and making his own decision about who he wants to be, good or bad. But Avi Arad didn't care about any of that, so we got this instead.
Yeah.
But that being said, Raimi and his co-writers still did their absolute best to use the
I will say, with the handicap, they still did a pretty good job.
Because not only
this is a case to be like,
Peter's
once you find out about the
actions cause
executive
MJ to go to
meddling,
Harry for
everything
emotional
makes
support that
sense.
Peter has no interest in giving her, but MJ then rejects Harry in guilt and confusion that hurt, causing Harry's memories to come flooding back and put him once again under his father's thrall.
I was right about her, about Peter, about everything.
Peter has now lied to him twice, kept the truth of what he's gone through from him, and Harry wants revenge. He threatens MJ into breaking up with Peter, taking away the person that he loves more than anything, the one he's been wanting to be with for 2 whole movies before this, only for Harry to then reveal,
"I'm the other guy."
And in a single afternoon, Peter has lost the love of his life and his best friend as a direct result of his own actions and his own attempts to ignore other people's truths.
Yep.
He is left alone and confused and unsure, and most of all, vulnerable. So he turns to the thing that makes him feel powerful.
The black suit.
The symbiote.
It's
He
a
goes to
drug.
Harry and throws a pumpkin bomb in his face. He goes to Eddie Brock and mercilessly ruins his entire career. He becomes a total douche. And as all
And
this
then
is
has a
happening, we
dancing
get a pretty
scene.
critical piece of exposition from Dr. Connors.
It amplifies characteristics of its host.
It doesn't make you aggressive. It doesn't make you egotistic. It doesn't make you a douche. It just takes what's already there, your worst qualities, and makes them worse.
Which means because this was always a part of Peter.
Like it wasn't the Goblin controlling Norman or the Arms controlling Otto. This is just what Peter, driven by resentment and pride, has become. A man whose every action is driven by vengeance and retribution. Everything he does past the point of putting the suit back on is about vengeance, getting back at the people who have wronged him, including Mary Jane.
With the only Gwen Stacy cameo in this thing.
He goes with Gwen Stacy, the girl he kissed as Spider-Man, the one who made MJ jealous. He flaunts her around, shows her off, tries as hard as he can to embarrass MJ and make her feel uncomfortable.
Sorry, I was thinking of an alternate universe where they throw the neck back and, well, she Gwen Stacy, if you know what I mean.
His problem. The staff tries to force him to leave because he's harassing her, and in the scuffle that follows...
Ooh, yeah. You hit MJ.
Immediately his face shifts. Seeing MJ on the ground where he put her makes something click. He's scared again. Scared of what he just did, who he just hurt.
Who are you?
I don't know.
Snapped him out of his...
That was the first question these movies asked. Who is
are
Peter
you?
Parker? And he's fallen so far that he can't even recognize himself anymore. He pushed everyone away, lied to them, hurt them, refused to engage with them honestly and openly, refused to be vulnerable, and that led him to this. An empty shell of violence and rage. And in response, he goes to a nearby church and sheds that armor that attached itself to him.
With
All
a
of
vibrating
this started
bell.
because he wasn't willing to open himself back up to pain and hardship. Because he wasn't willing to sit with MJ and what she was going through. Because he wasn't willing to sit down with Harry and actually talk to him when he had the chance. Because he
think Spectacular Spider-Man brings back the bell thing.
And hatred
Anyway.
and fear and a vengeful heart. And now he becomes naked at the top of that bell tower. He becomes weak and vulnerable. And afterwards, he opens up that broken door again for the first time in a long time for someone
Aunt
else.
May.
And he doesn't avoid the issue, acting like it isn't real. He doesn't try to push her away. He's just honest.
I hurt her, Aunt May. I don't know what to do.
Peter has spent most of this movie trying to act like he has everything figured out, like he doesn't need help, like he's learned every lesson he's needed to learn. Opening himself up to other truths would mean admitting that even after everything he's gone through, he still doesn't know what to do. But now he's vulnerable enough to admit that he doesn't know what to do. And May reveals to him her truth, and Peter, for the first time in this movie, listens.
You start by doing the hardest thing. You forgive yourself. I believe in you, Peter. You're a good person. And I know you will find a way to put it right.
It's not much.
Good luck.
But it's enough. To know that even after all he's done, there's still someone who believes in his goodness. To know that he doesn't need to be perfect. He doesn't need to do everything right. Aunt May doesn't tell him that everyone else is the problem and that Peter has nothing to be ashamed about. She tells him that he still has the power and the responsibility to put things right. And when MJ is kidnapped by both Sandman and the symbiote as they try to draw him out, he has the strength to rediscover who he really is, who he's always been. He goes to Harry to ask for help, to admit his weakness, knowing that he can't beat them both, only for Harry to reject him. After all that's happened, why would Harry be willing to listen to Peter's truth now? But Harry has a moment of realization himself. While looking at the wreckage of their fight, Harry, for the first time, listens.
This butler we introduced right now.
I cleaned his wound.
These movies aren't perfect, but we've established that.
The blade that pierced his body came from his glider.
I didn't tell you that for years, but
trying
shut
to
up.
defend your father's honor, but there's no question that he died by his own hand.
When Peter gets there alone, he finds MJ in a taxi cab in the middle of a black web, and before he can get her out of it, the one behind everything shows his face.
Eddie Brock.
What do we know about Edward Brock?
Not much.
Pretty much nothing. The only things we see him do are cheat and lie and delude himself into thinking he's going to marry Gwen Stacy after getting coffee with her once. He's a kiss ass and a pushover. He tells jokes that aren't funny and tries way too hard to present himself as a cool and talented artist. He does everything he can think of that might make him seem like a neat guy to those around him. But everyone sees through his act, because Eddie Brock is completely and utterly hollow.
God,
so
I want you to help me kill
so
Spider-Man.
Defined by lies and insincerity that there's not even a person underneath it all that we can see. He's so worried about pleasing other people that he has no individuality himself. He has no truth of his own other than please like me. Eddie Brock is, intentionally or not, a direct middle finger to everything the inclusion of Venom and the symbiote represents. This is what you become when your main goal is for everyone to like you, regardless of what you have to do to make it happen, regardless of what parts of yourself you have to betray. While this entire movie is about engaging with other people's truths, Eddie Brock serves as a stark warning to not let other people's truths overtake your identity, the way that the symbiote overtakes him after everyone else rejects him. The symbiote is the one thing that will give him power, the one thing that will accept him, even if only to use him. If nobody else wants him, then he will just destroy them. And I can think of no better villain to cap off this trilogy with, this monument to insincerity. Because ultimately, this is a battle between the sincere and the insincere, a battle between a man desperately trying to hold on to who he is, and a man whose entire identity hinges on what he thinks other people want him to be. The conflict at the end of Spider-Man 3 is the exact conflict of Sam Raimi making Spider-Man 3. The desire to stay true to who you are and what you care about, unconcerned with what others think of you.
I never looked at
the
that.
desire
That's
to
actually a
do
really
what you
deep
think
way of
others
looking at
want
it.
you to do. The
Good
desire
work.
to please the people around you, to be liked and admired because you'll give them what they want. You
I'm
can't
sure it's
give
a
up
bad
the
thing
black
speak
suit.
on,
What
but
if you don't have
one of
the
those
power
things
to
in the
win
background looked
without
like it
What if
said
you get
Thanos
beaten?
speak
What if they
on.
don't
Like,
like you?
wrong
What if they
universe,
don't
dude.
care anymore because they want Venom, not
Or
Sandman?
right
So
universe,
put
but you know.
Venom in the movie, but try to do him your way. But what if they don't like that either? I don't know. I don't
There's
know.
no easy answer.
I wonder if Spider-Man 3 ever really had a chance. Because the more popular these movies become, the more people watch them and think about them and speculate and talk about what villains they
There
want
are a
to
lot
see
of
and what they wanna
Spider-Man
see
what
happen.
ifs.
I think the pressure starts to mount. You really start to wonder if Avi's right and you have been selfish. You have been ignoring what other people want to see. You're so worried that you can't do it a third time. You can't make it work the way you did before. So you make something that you don't fully believe in because you've become so worried that people won't care if you don't try to make sure it's something other people will like, not just something that you like. As a perspective storyteller myself, I think about that all the time. I think about what the right balance is between how much I should worry about what other people will get out of what I make and how much I should focus on just doing it for myself. Because as important as it is to understand who you are as an artist, art isn't art if it isn't shared with others. And so don't you have a responsibility to those people to try and make something that they'll care about just as much as you do? Maybe what they think
make
is
good
even
work,
more
man.
important.
I appreciate
I think
the stuff you
Spider-Man
do.
3 is the result of that struggle. The movie isn't like this because of the studio interference. It's like this because it is actively fighting against that interference. That's what this ending fight is all about. And Peter can't win that fight. Without the suit, he's weak, just like he knew he was. He can't win against this just being himself. The only way he can win is because someone else was willing, finally, to listen.
Harry came to the rescue.
Neither Harry or Peter were willing to listen to each other throughout this entire movie. Neither of them were willing to really talk to each other, and it's only when Peter and Harry are both willing to open themselves up, to be vulnerable on their own, that they are able to take each other's hand and fight this together. Two people who are finally willing, after all this time, to listen. They work together to save MJ and bring.
And they do a
Sandman,
damn
and
good job.
eventually, it's just Peter.
It's a great
Parker
tag
and
team
Eddie
fight.
Eddie ties him up, ready to kill him, and Peter tries to empathize with him. He tries to reach him the same way he reached Otto.
I know what it feels like. It feels good. The power, everything. But you'll lose yourself.
I like being bad.
It makes me happy.
I don't personally take that line at face value, because how close was Peter to becoming that? He was able to break himself out of it, but for Eddie, this is the closest thing he's ever had to an actual identity. Any kind of truth that's his own, even though it's still built on what other people think of him, his anger towards his rejection. What broke Peter out of it was directly hurting someone he loved, seeing how his actions affected someone else.
Eddie doesn't
but
have
Eddie
that
has
possibly
nothing
happening.
close to someone he loves. No
He
truth
can't be snapped
that
out
he
of
would
it.
be willing to understand, especially not Peter's. There is nothing that could break him from this, but there is someone who can save Peter. Harry does what his father would never have done. He
Sacrifice
listened
himself.
to the truth, accepted it, and sacrificed himself for the sake of saving someone he cared about. In the end, Harry does get to choose his own path. Peter takes the opportunity Harry gives him to break free and trap the symbiote in a cage of sound. He pulls Eddie from that armor,
great
that
shot, too.
power, and it grows into the monster that it always was. Peter throws a pumpkin bomb inside, and Eddie jumps into its arms as it dies, because he would rather die with that power than live on without it. Empty and miserable. But despite defeating Venom, destroying that symbol of insincerity, it's still not over. There's still one man that Peter needs to face.
I didn't want this.
Sandman. Flint.
But I had no choice.
Flint Marko. He has been the object of Peter's hatred this entire movie. The thing he has focused all his frustration and resentment on. And yet here Marko is being vulnerable.
My daughter was dying. I needed money. I was scared.
We see what really happened that night. It wasn't a man with angry eyes who just wanted to hurt somebody. It was a scared man who shot Uncle Ben on accident.
Yep.
I'm not asking you to forgive me.
It was a tragedy, nothing less.
I just want you to understand.
And that's what Spider-Man 3 is all about. That's what this trilogy is all about. The struggle to understand. The struggle to understand who we are. The struggle to understand that it's safe to share that truth with others. And the struggle to understand that everyone has a truth beyond our own. Peter was afraid to be vulnerable, afraid to open up his truth to scrutiny, afraid to lose the happiness he felt like he'd earned. And that led him down a path of darkness and selfishness and pain where he lost all sense of the truth entirely. But when he shed that armor, allowed himself to be vulnerable and weak, allowed himself to hear and listen, he finally has the strength to say,
I forgive you.
He finally has the strength to say he was wrong.
I should never have hurt you. Said those things.
And Harry, who's finally allowed himself to see the truth of things, tells him,
None of that matters, Peter. You're my friend. Best friend.
in the face of honesty, in the face of truth comes forgiveness and love. If you're willing to look past your own ego, if you're willing to look past what you want something or somebody to be, you will finally be able to see what it really is, what it always was. Spider-Man 3 is a story about understanding others' truths. It's about being willing to relinquish your power in order to simply sit and listen. It's about trying to meet people where they are rather than demanding that they be where you think they should be. Spider-Man 3 is a flawed movie, an absolute mess of a thing that, in my opinion, does not hold up to its predecessors on the whole. But when I was finally willing to sit down and listen to what it had to say,
but we
I
still
found
love
a
it.
movie that had something I needed to hear. Spread love, not hate. And spreading love doesn't mean being positive all the time. It doesn't mean liking every piece of media that you watch. It doesn't mean never criticize anything or anyone. It doesn't even mean liking Spider-Man 3. Spreading love means being understanding and empathetic. It means not immediately dismissing anything that doesn't fit your mold of what it should be. It means understanding that your truth isn't the only truth. I think the reason I still love this movie, in spite of all of its problems, is because in the end, it is still committed to being as much of itself as possible. Even with the mandates, even with the pressure to please the fans, this movie is still 100% Sam Raimi. And I think people struggle to understand that what made these movies so special was always their sincerity, their willingness to be themselves, to be honest. Sam Raimi knew who he was as a storyteller. He wanted to share that with the world, and he tried his best to understand the truth of what this character meant to people while still trying to retain his own identity. Raimi prioritized telling the story he wanted to tell, sharing his truth rather than conforming to what other people wanted his truth to be. And maybe he made a movie that was flawed because of that, because he tried his best to retain the story he wanted to tell, that he felt like he needed to tell. And on some level, he's paid for that. He not only has listened to people lambast him for making this movie, but he himself has called Spider-Man 3 awful because by the end, he didn't believe in it. I imagine it's one of his greatest artistic regrets, and maybe one day he'll be able to find the strength to forgive himself for it. But for
and
now,
then Multiverse of
I
Madness
still
came
respect and love Spider-Man 3 in spite of that, because I think it stands as a testament to the resilience of artistry in the face of those who view art as nothing more than a product. I still love Spider-Man 3 because even if Raimi didn't fully believe in it, it still remains sincere. Sam Raimi was sincere, and I think that's all you can ask an artist to be. I think an essential part of being an artist, telling a story, is being vulnerable, being willing to put a true part of yourself out into the world for it to be judged, criticized, and picked apart by angry nerds on the internet. Sometimes even to be mocked and ridiculed, but also to be loved and enjoyed. Sometimes that part of yourself is the thing that could change someone's life, make them realize something they never knew about themselves or about the world. Sometimes that part of yourself can make a little kid who felt alone feel a little bit less alone. Spider-Man taught me that it was okay to be vulnerable, that it was okay to bleed, that it was okay, even vital, to be sincere. Spider-Man taught me that sharing myself with others, sharing my art with others, can be scary, but that it can never be worse than only being half of myself. Spider-Man taught me that there were truths other than my own, and that the only path to fulfillment and peace is to listen and understand. This trilogy is, in my opinion, a celebration of creation.
And boy, is that
a
so
love letter
hard
to artistic
sometimes.
integrity and sincerity, a three-part story about the necessity of vulnerability both in art and in life, the necessity to find and share your truth while being open to others. And here at the end, what I want you to do is go and make something. Put all of your heart and your soul into it. Write a book, take some photos, play some music, make a YouTube video. But more than anything, what I ask of you is to be sincere while you do it. Above all else, no matter what, be sincere.
I have a project in mind that I'm thinking of.
I wish we could have gotten to see Sam Raimi's Spider-Man
a short little idea,
but I really can't think of a better ending to
this
this trilogy than this one.
I like to hold out hope that maybe one day we can. But I mean, there's been a lot of remakes nowadays and sequels to things that no one asked for. Why not?
Takes it stepping down to meet him, and they look at each other. And there's so much in that connection, so much that both of them have been through, so many lessons they've learned, and whether we get to see them or not, so many lessons they'll have to learn. But for now,
and they made it work
together. Just these two kids who have been through so much, two people who have, in their own ways, felt invisible, seeing each other for the very first time.
I don't know what Spider-Man 4 would have even had. I don't know. It's a really well-made video, too. Never really noticed how much these movies actually touch on until it has it pointed out to you, too. These movies, they're not flawless. We all know that for a fact, but it's comforting just to know you can always come back to this and they'll always be there. Just, I don't know. It's just, I can't even put it into words. I'm bad at words. I don't know. I don't know. In nature, everything feels more corporate and, you know, made MCU and stuff like that. Just everything's corporatized to make money and all that jazz. Which, of course, everything in the end of the day is made to make money. Well, at least just about everything, anyway. Yeah, it's just nice to see a sincere art project and stuff like that. Am I making sense? Probably not, but I don't know. I love these films. I don't know what else to say besides it makes you feel like a kid again. It just kind of... I think I went through most of what I mean to say throughout the thing. Just, you know, as a kid, you go up there because it's Spider-Man, superheroes, all that cool stuff, powers, all that jazz. And as a result, you come to realize, oh, there's so much more depth to any of this stuff. It's like you actually understand what the meaning is. You understand the struggle of just trying to survive in the real world and how hard it is just to try to be a decent human being sometimes, and how easy it is to be just a prick even if you don't realize that's what you're being. But... and just trying to get by and do the right thing. It's so hard. But it has to be done. I said it before offhand, but I'll say it again. Life is hell, but it's up to us humans to try to be angels, just to make life a little bit easier for each other. Gotta do what you can, right? But anyway, I have a message from Ratsbones that I gotta read off. Something he explaining as to why he wanted me to react to this for his birthday. I'm afraid. I am truly afraid of who I am as a being. First, I thought that my support was a good thing, and whatever negative thoughts were just thoughts. But now I worried that just talking to people was hurting them. Okay, that's wrong, dude. Hurting people, talking to me is not gonna hurt me. No. I'm gonna keep reading, but you're wrong. It's just so wrong. I've even started at asking people who are my friends in real life. I believe they are being insincere and not genuine when I talk to them, even that they are. I even said being and not person, because I see myself as nothing, and even believing that I was never real in the first place. Well, first place. Okay, no, you're a real person, for freak's sake. It's so naive. But I care much about that. You're a real person. You're not some sort of video game character. I know we've all had these moments where we're just depressed in ourselves, not knowing what they do. Do I even have the right to feel happy? Is everyone betraying me? But no. I laugh because I've been there, dude. It gets better. It does. And sometimes it gets harder, but sometimes it gets better. That's the story of life. Okay. I see myself as a broken puppet. The reason why I like worlds like Marvel, Ben 10, Supernatural, Persona, SMG4, and so many worlds is because I see sincere pieces of me. I love these worlds because I feel home in them. And I love them because even though half of these worlds I do it less, the people are allowed to take problems into their own hands without consequences and no one being hurt. That is my sincere truth. Well, I'm not meaning to be laughing at your truth, but you just seem... I can see why you see yourself in these worlds. There's a part of you that feels connected to them, the characters, because at the end of the day, that's what you connect for, not one off the base of a character's genetics, or what they are racially, or sexually, or blah. It's who they are as a person that matters. I don't give a crap what you look like. I care about how you act. But take problems in their own hands without consequences and no one being hurt. Have you been are you sure? I can't help but notice these worlds actually, they do take problems in their own hands and people get hurt. I mean, superheroes and 10, stuff like that, but I get what you're trying to mean. I guess the mean is no one in the real world gets hurt. I don't know. There are consequences to everything, because that's true to real life. But, I don't mean to be laughing at your truth, but just... I laugh because you misunderstand, even though things are hard right now and stuff like that. I don't even know how to put these into words. I don't even know where to begin. I guess what all I can say is... It's okay that you find a part of yourself in these worlds and trying to just feel like things are better there, but they aren't. They gotta take these worlds have to deal with eldritch abominations every 5 minutes. We don't gotta do that in our world. We gotta deal with death, taxes, and the ice capades. Although one could argue it would be better in that case, because at least in that case, everything's fine for the most part, except for when the evil supervillain attacks, and then the evil supervillain wipes out all of reality. But I don't know. I guess I can't know your life. I'm sorry that you feel that way, that life's being insincere and hurtful to you, but I don't know. I can just offer what I can do to help. If you need someone to talk to, you know where to find me. So, yeah, I'm always there for you, man. Even, well, except for when I'm at work, but doesn't really do entirely. I don't know. I'll be there to talk to you if you need someone to talk to. You can be your truth to me. Even though I'm probably bad-mouthed it like I am here. Sorry, I should have read the whole thing before I just speak it, but you don't understand. Life always seems harder than it actually is, because we focus on the negatives of things. Look at... I act like things are terrible for me now, but meanwhile I have a great family, people who love me, and a roof over my head, and I feel like a freaking failure because I'm still stuck living with my parents at 27 years old. But I'm truly blessed to have people who care about, love me, and so are you. People do genuinely care about you, and they love you. You just can't see it because the brain focuses on all the negative sides and doesn't focus on the positive, because the brain is the ultimate pessimist that hates itself. You are cared for. You are loved. Remember that. And that is the sincere truth.